Welcome back to the top 25 college basketball power rankings, and let's get right into it. Starting with number 25, Houston. They've dropped 2 games in the past couple weeks, and then they played close to Wichita State in a double overtime game. Houston is not playing at their best right now. They have a great resume, but as you will see as we go along here, we prioritize the best teams as opposed to the most deserving teams here. Number 24, we've got Murray State. They only have 2 losses, but I'm not convinced that their competition is the greatest. This is a very good team, and they're rolling. They're tied with Gonzaga for the longest win streak in college basketball, so they are a great team, but we'll just have to see going forward. Since I think their strength of schedule is soft, they'll keep at the 24 solid ranking, but they've got a matchup with Belmont later this week that might be able to rise them if they are able to prevail. Number 23, we've got St. Mary's, who is coming off a great week with 2 wins in West Coast Conference play, including 1 to USF, so they rejoin the rankings. Number 22, we've got USC, who is coming off a closer than many thought it would be game against Washington State. They were able to also beat Washington this week and, of course, have that win over UCLA just about 10 days ago, so this team is rolling. Number 21, UConn has also had a good week, and you see that they've got that great game against Villanova, and we will actually have a betting lock for this game at the end of the video, so be sure to stay tuned for it. Number 20, we've got Providence, and they have been playing pretty bad recently, going down to the wire with Butler and losing to Villanova on their home turf. This Providence team wins all the close games, the one exception being that Villanova game, but then they come back and then beat Butler by 2 points, so Providence really is not getting it done against these inferior opponents. Number 19, we've got Ohio State, who was hot, but then lost to Iowa. So they're relegated to the number 19 spot. You will not see Iowa on these rankings. I just think they're too up and down, but we will have a lock on Iowa's coming game against Michigan State. Number 18, we've got Bama, who's coming off the loss to Kentucky, but overall they're playing pretty good as they were able to beat Arkansas at home a couple weeks ago. So this is a solid Alabama team, and I tend to favor the teams that can beat good opponents like Alabama can. I just really don't know what to do with Alabama. Same thing with Houston, really, where they could beat the best of opponents and then lose to the worst. Houston, of course, doesn't have a quad 1 win right now. Alabama is quite the opposite. Moving on, we've got number 17, Texas. Obviously, they lost to Texas Tech in a tough matchup, but this Texas team is really rolling right now. We're able to beat Kansas a couple of weeks back. Number 16, we've got UCLA, who's coming off 2 good wins over the Washington Schools. They will play Arizona State tonight as they attempt to continue their winning ways. On to the middle 7 teams, we've got number 15, Wisconsin, who's coming off a great win to Michigan, all things considered. A lot of the chatter was about the post-game shenanigans, but honestly, that is a great win for Wisconsin. And you'll see here we've got the little stack up because Wisconsin did lose to Illinois. Speaking of which, Illinois is coming off a win over Michigan State, a team that is no longer ranked. But before that, they had that brutal loss at Rutgers at the RAC. And before that, they also lost to Purdue. So that is why I'm going to keep Illinois here. They're playing pretty good in the grand scheme of things if we look back 4 to 6 weeks, but they've got an upcoming showdown against a good Ohio State team, and that should be a great game. Then they go at Michigan, and then 13, you see Rutgers. By no means is Rutgers even an at-large team in the tournament after their loss to Purdue. They're on the bubble, certainly, but it was the early season that really did this Rutgers team in terms of resume. Right now, they're playing like one of the best teams. Disregard that loss to Purdue. Almost every team in the nation would have lost to Purdue at this point. But you really just can't make up those 4 straight wins against AP top 25 opponents. If we take off that at Northwestern loss where they lost by 1, just looking after that, they were crushing these ranked teams. The one exception being Ohio State, which they barely squeaked out the win against. But honestly, Rutgers is playing great right now. They're ranked 13 because these are the power rankings. We care about the best teams and not the most deserving. Looking forward, they've got another showdown with Wisconsin at home. I think they could win that game. And they also play Michigan on the road in an always dangerous environment, although Juwan Howard will not be there for that game. Duke continues rolling in the ACC. Some of you Duke fans might not love this ranking for them, as I have to drop them down after they've played close to some of these inferior ACC opponents. Of course, they did get it done against FSU, but I'm going to have Duke at 12 for the time being. Then we're going to have Tennessee at 11. This is a really good Tennessee team. Got the win over Kentucky last week, and I really valued that win. But then if you're going to Arkansas, the home crowd really kicks up in both of these games. I say it's a net positive, even losing to a really good Arkansas team. Arkansas, of course, is up here because of that Tennessee win and their Auburn win, which looks a little less shiny after Florida also did it. But the only blemish for Arkansas really in the past 10 to 12 games is that game at Bama where they lost by 1. This Arkansas team is really hot right now, and I expect them to continue it going forward, but they do have a tough road game at Florida. Then they play Kentucky at home. I think they could win that game. LSU at home, that's also a tough game. And then at Tennessee, at the end of the season, they might drop that one. Next, we move on to Texas Tech, who is rolling right now. And honestly, I could see them being higher. The one thing holding them back was that loss at Oklahoma. Obviously, a tough environment. They have a chance to avenge it tomorrow. They're favored by 10 at home. But these last 2 wins versus number 7 Baylor and at 20 Texas were great wins for them. Granted, Baylor was a bit shorthanded for that game. They've got Kevin McCullough and Bryson Williams playing great for them right now. Let's move on to the top 8, and you see that line there designates the 1 seed, and we've got number 8 Villanova. Already talked about them a little bit. They won at Providence. That's a great win. Followed it up with another Big East win on Saturday, so they will remain in the top 2 seeds. Number 7 Baylor. Don't really know what to think about this team. Could have dropped them lower as they're not playing their best basketball right now, but I'm crediting the fact that they are shorthanded. I think if they can get healthy by the time they have that home showdown against Kansas and win that game, I think this team could be a 1 seed. After that, they've got at a ranked Texas team, so that will be a brutal game. But if Baylor can finish strong, I would not be surprised if their ceiling is the 1 seed here. Then we've got number 6, Kentucky, who grabbed the great win over Alabama on Saturday. Of course, they lost at Tennessee last week, but they blew out Florida a little bit before that. Now that win is looking a little bit better. Looking forward, they've got a home date versus LSU, and then at Arkansas will be their test for the remainder of the regular season. Number 5, we've got a great Purdue team, and I had a really tough time deciding who to put in terms of the 5 versus 4 and Auburn versus Purdue, but I'm going to dismiss that Auburn loss and give them the nod. Purdue is playing great. They've only lost 1 of their last 10 games, I believe. In that stretch, they've got a win over Ohio State, Michigan once. Of course, their only blemish was at Michigan. They beat Illinois and just beat a rising Rutgers team. Remainder of the schedule for them, they've got at Michigan State and then at Wisconsin. Those will be 2 tough games for them. Number 4, Auburn. Obviously, we already talked about it. They lost at Florida. Had a chance to win that game. Florida tried to give it up at the end there, but they ultimately were not able to prevail. So they moved down from the 2 ranking to the 4 ranking. Not a brutal loss, especially only by 1 point. Next, we move to Kansas, who has won their last 3 since that loss at Texas, and it's their remaining schedule that really gets tougher for them. Home date against Kansas State, I expect them to win that, although Kansas State does play pretty close to Kansas sometimes in these rivalry matches, but Kansas usually prevails in those. Then they've got at Baylor, as we described earlier, will be a massive game this Saturday, and then 2 dates against TCU, and finally a home date against Texas. Number 2 seed, we've got Arizona, who was barely able to hold off a good Oregon team on Saturday. Arizona just rises up that 1 spot after that Auburn loss. And number 1, we've got Gonzaga, who is killing the competition in the WCC. It could be the widest average margin of victory in conference play. Let's move on to the 22-22 locks, and as promised, we've got UConn against Villanova, and I'm taking UConn here. Villanova is the hotter team. They're the better team, yes, but this is going to be a raucous environment at UConn, and you just cannot dispel the home court advantage. UConn is actually favored in this one. I'm taking UConn -1. I think it's good value there. Then we've got Michigan State at Iowa, as promised as well. And I'm going to take Michigan State plus the 6.5 points. At Iowa, a raucous environment. I just like the value here. Michigan State has lost 4 or 5, but I just think they're a better team than Iowa in the grand scheme of things. I just don't respect Iowa that much. That win against Ohio State was a great one, but I just have a feeling Michigan's going to come up there and put on a show against Iowa. I think they've got something to prove after this losing streak, and I think that they will do it. Finally, we've got some A10 action. St. Bonaventure's just been about the hottest team in the A10. Give me them -8 at home. A little bit of a degenerate line here, but I like them against Rhode Island to continue their win streak they've got. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for another episode of Bracketology in the future.